open border school. We won't have to play the guessing game. We won't have to cross our fingers.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll let people into the meeting as they show up. And I think if something happens and you drop back out, I'll make sure you get back in if you log back in, or else sometimes it lets you back in automatically if you've already been logged in. So my name is Kathy Jones, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Alabama, the state league. And I just wanted to, for the folks on this call tonight that may not be as familiar with our structure, we've got 9 local leagues across the state of Alabama, and the state league we're basically made up of members that come in from all the different local leagues. And one of our major projects is the Voting Rights Restoration Network that we are there to support getting citizens their rights, who are disenfranchised or think they're disenfranchised, their rights back. And we have, the league has been working with others on VRR since 2018. It was exciting to see Ellen come back working with the Campaign Legal Center, because I remember one of the earliest times that the League of Women Voters worked on VRR was back in 2018, when there was a voting rights project in Alabama. And that sort of shifted, and now we've got Restore Your Vote, which is, Campaign Legal Center has been with us throughout this entire process. And so what we wanted to do tonight was to kind of have a 2-part. We're doing 2 things here. One of them is one thing I wanted to do was to recognize the fact that this is something.
I texted to you.
Hold on one moment. If everybody could go on mute, if you're not, yeah. So tonight, I wanted folks to understand what the league's VRR project is and how we're trying to support the local leagues and provide educational opportunities as well for everyone to get more familiar with the whole VRR process. But then we also invited Ellen to come in and give more of an overview training so that everyone can get, familiar with the situation in Alabama. And basically, this is not a perfect solution. What we're trying to do now is fix things that we still have issues that need to be resolved. But what we're talking about tonight is the direct service, which is helping people who think that they're disenfranchised get their rights back. And so I'm going to hand this off to our League of Women Voters of Alabama VRR Voting Rights Restoration League, Bryan Lorge, and he is coordinating different teams of folks that are supporting the VRR process, and then he'll pass it off to Ellen, who will do the presentation about the VRR issue and help people get more of a familiarity on what needs to change or what the issues are. So I'm going to pass it off. Bryan, I'll bring up the charts here. Thank you.
That'd be great. And while you're doing that, I just want to echo what Kathy said. I'm thrilled to see this many people on tonight. And I just kind of scroll through the participants, and there are a few of our real stalwart VRR warriors already on here, but it looks like it's mostly new people as far as it looks to me, which I'm grateful for, because we're trying to get this up and running and a little bit more robust than what it's been in the past. So, Kathy, you want to go on to the next slide?
Faith in Action Alabama, the organizer here in Montgomery. And I've been working with Oniemi, Paula, Dana, and Ella with to develop the community. Well, first the VOCA team, which I know they were already doing.
You know who that is, Kathy?
Assisting.
Yes, I need to mute Dana. All right.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sorry about
All
that. I was thinking I wasn't sure what it was.
Well,
So,
neither was I, so, okay.
okay, all right, I am going to go back to share. Just a second.
All right. And like I say, if you can go on one more slide. And this is, I don't want to say this is the crux of the matter, but to me, this is a real important slide. This is the cover from our activist manual. And if you can read it, and it's hard to read on the screen, but it says the mission is clear. It's to help people with conviction in Alabama to vote. And I think that's what we're all here to do. Putting this guide together was a cooperative effort of many organizations, including the League of Women Voters of Alabama, the Ordinary People Society, Greater Birmingham Ministries, Faith in Action Alabama, ANVU, SPLC, and Black Belt Citizens. So it really is a cooperative effort to get this process kind of, we all agree that this is what we do. You're going to hear a lot about the nitty-gritty details of this over the next 90 minutes or so. But again, it's kind of a cooperative. Next slide. And this is basically talks about what the League of Women Voters, what our network has done. And one of the key things is we've got different levels of training.
Sorry.
That's okay. And I'll kind of run through it. And these are not necessarily one step over the others. There's some that are independent. But the first, my goal is I would like everybody in the League of Women Voters that does voter services to have at least basic training in the VRR process. And the purpose of this is if you're out doing a voter service event and you run into someone that may need our help, at least they'll know, what the process is and how to get them in contact with additional resources. So that's the basic level. The next level up is what I call our VRR warriors. And these are the people that have the capability to analyze a citizen status and determine required steps to get them to be able to register to vote. And as you learn, it may be as simple as they can just immediately register, or they may have to go through some additional processes. One of the processes we have that supports this is a system called Alacourt, which is a database system that has information necessary to analyze a case in it. Now, it's not a requirement to have an Alacourt access to do VRR support. And we'll do an overview of Alacourt tonight, but hopefully within the next few weeks, when we find out how many people are interested, we'll do an in-depth Alacourt training session. And Alacourt folks, even if they are not at an event, we've had several instances where we've had them on calls or people out at a voter service event. If they have a citizen that needs help, they can call one of these people and they can do the research for them. And then the top level is what I call our VRR ninjas. And these are people like Kathy and the people from CLC. And we have several others here in the state that have been doing this longer than I have in much more depth. And it seems like occasionally we run into some very strange cases. And when I'm doing this, if I hit something that's something unusual or something I don't understand, I'll just contact one of these folks. And frequently this may involve contacting the Board of Pardon and Paroles or sending a letter to Board of Pardon and Paroles to try to get an issue clarified. So that's kind of what composes the network. Next slide, Kathy. And I kind of redid this slide today after talking to Kathy. I've never been real good at explaining what we're trying to do, and this is my latest iteration. But the first bullet there is we want to be able to reach out to anybody in the state that has a felony conviction and thinks they may have lost their voting rights or needs their voting rights restored to be able to provide them assistance. So that's really the goal of what we're trying to put together. And Kathy touched on this, but I would like to make it where, again, we can support every league chapter in the state and any partner organization that we could work with that needs our support. So, again, we have done some of this remote. I would like to have a VRR point of contact at every league, every different league chapter, at least coordinate support. So even if it's a smaller chapter that doesn't have someone that's trained, we want them to be able to provide these services, and this network will allow us to do that. And the other thing, the biggest change I think we've made towards the end of last year and moving to this year is trying to partner with other organizations that have contacts with the people that need help. What we found out is, especially seems like a lot of churches, a lot of other organizations that provide support have contact and can use this. So we're trying to set up, and that could just be a one-time event where, you know, we send someone out to provide VR service and need it, or we are working on some formal agreements to make it kind of an ongoing thing. So that's kind of what the network should do. But the biggest thing is, to summarize, is just try to get this where anybody in the state has access to VR support and get themselves registered to vote. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen from CLC and let her go through. She's doing most of the heavy lifting tonight. She's going to get into the details. I'll let Ellen get started.
That sounds good. Thanks so much, Brian and Kathy. Yeah, so my name is Ellen Boettcher. I'm a legal fellow at Campaign Legal Center, but I am excited to be back working in Alabama and on felony disenfranchisement and reenfranchisement work because I was working with Campaign Legal Center and the League prior to this job and prior to going to law school. So I was living in Mobile at that time. So I see some familiar names and faces, which is really great. But then I went to law school and I'm now back at Campaign Legal Center and really excited to be here tonight and working with you all. So I guess maybe I'll go to the slides, Kathy, if that's okay. Thank you. And tonight, I'm not sure like how much familiarity people have with felony reenfranchisement work in Alabama, but basically I want to talk about the history of felony in Alabama and the voting rights restoration process. So well, I think we'll start with a 10-ish minute video that talks about the history of Alabama's felony disenfranchisement scheme. And then we'll kind of go into the nitty-gritty of how do you work with somebody and help them get their voting rights back. And as you'll come to find, a lot of convictions are no longer disqualifying. So all a person needs to do is register to vote. It's not harder than that for many people who've been wrongly told that they don't have the right to vote because of a 2017 law change. So we'll kind of talk about that. I'll send you all an activist manual, which I think goes into a lot of detail if you're really interested and have a lot of questions. And then I'm a resource to you all if you have questions as you're talking to somebody and want more assistance with that. So I'm going to share the video and let me know if you have issues with audio. 1 second. Okay.
Emotionally, it makes me feel like
I can hear it.
Okay. You can hear it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
not being able to vote and participate in a democratic society. Emotionally, it makes me feel like a ghost, like I don't exist.
I work, I pay taxes, I do all the things that everybody else do. But when it comes down to voting, I can't voice my opinion about anything that really matters.
I paid my debts to society, so why can't I have my rights back to vote?
6 million people in the United States cannot vote because of a felony conviction. Mostly, they live in 12 states that can take away your voting rights forever. One of the most aggressive is Alabama. Almost 250,000 people have been caught in the net.
The estimate suggests that nearly 30% of the Black male population could be barred from voting because of these criminal histories, these criminal convictions.
The Campaign Legal Center decided that a lawsuit was the only way to solve this problem.
Good morning. That's right.
Tim Lanier is one of the people whose voting rights we're fighting for.
This is my mother. Be back at what time?
8:30. Okay.
Tim is a guy who wakes up at 5 in the morning to volunteer at the local food bank.
I help unload trucks. I carry food to different places, whatever they need. Everybody need help sometime. Half of my jobs I did in the military didn't cross over to the jobs in civilian world. So, that was a problem for me. So I made some bad choices.
He ended up being convicted of armed robbery and served 18 years in prison. And after 18 years in which he went from being a young person to a man, the state of Alabama has seen fit for him to come back to the community. They encourage him to engage in all of this activity that shows that he's a good, upstanding member of society while on probation, and yet he's unable to vote.
Regardless of anything that I've done right in my life, that one day that this happened has ruined the rest of my life as far as being a natural citizen of the United States. Because you're not a citizen if you can't vote.
Felon disenfranchisement has a long history. At the end of the Civil War, if Black people would now have the right to vote, the whole balance of political power was going to change. In states like Alabama, they began creating new laws that would guarantee that Black people could not vote. One of the strategies was a law that said if you've been convicted of any kind of crime, you are permanently barred from voting. Lots of Black people were convicted of made-up crimes, being out after dark, being in groups of 10 people, getting a job without their former plantation owner's permission. So Black people couldn't vote. In the 1950s and 60s, you see the emergence of the civil rights leaders. Ministers and ordinary people saying it's time for us to fight for our rights. And in places like Birmingham, that fight was painful.
When I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, we had a demonstration on Fifth Avenue, South downtown, for voting.
Police were trying to intimidate protesters and marchers. They were attacked by dogs.
Fire department hosed the demonstrators down. Police was giving everybody the signal to attack. And that's what they did. That's all it was. It wasn't right.
When the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, there was great hope.
Their cause must be our cause too. Because it's not just Negroes, but really it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
But in many ways, it wasn't the victory we thought it was.
Constance Todd is 71 years old. She's always been registered to vote ever since she turned 18. So in 2016, she received a letter from the County Board of Registrars that said they looked back into her record and she had a conviction, a criminal conviction for a fraudulent check and a theft crime over 20 years ago.
Well, my marriage had just broke up. He took all the money out the bank, and I could not see my kids go without. And I wrote a series of bad checks. I did this, but I paid for it. I paid restitution, I paid time.
Ms. Todd never had any conviction ever since then. For the next 20 years, she had absolutely no problems with the law. She's been an upstanding member of society, working, volunteering, voting.
It was devastating to find out that someone could just come and take my rights to vote. If I do something, I paid for it. So what gives you the right to take my rights to vote? They're going to penalize me again.
I'm so delighted to bring to you a young man that's on a mission from God. He's doing extraordinary things. Help me introduce this man of God. Pastor, father of Ordinary Society, Dr. Peter Boettcher.
I went to prison for drug charges. I did 14 years. When I got out, you know, one of the first things I wanted to do was go vote, be part of the society. And they told me I couldn't vote, man. And I got mad. I got so angry. So I could start expressing myself on how we need to get these voters' rights.
Citizen. In the United States of America, your birth certificate says you're a citizen, but you don't have full citizenship unless you got that right to vote. If we can recall when Martin Luther King them did it and got Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act now. Come on now. It wasn't no politician.
Then in 2017, Alabama took a small step forward.
A new Alabama law may allow more formerly incarcerated the right to vote. The Alabama Constitution says people convicted cannot vote, but lawmakers have disagreed on what those crimes are. The new list defines what crimes will cause someone to lose their right to vote.
But the list doesn't make a lot of sense. For example, you could have a single theft crime conviction and lose your right to vote permanently, but you could be convicted of embezzlement or fraud and a number of other white collar crimes, and you don't lose your right to vote.
Well, the verdict is in. A Lee County jury has convicted Alabama House Speaker Mike Hubbard in his felony ethics case, removing Hubbard from office.
Hubbard was convicted on charges related to using his public position for personal gain.
Mike Hubbard will now spend 4 years in prison. He will also spend 8 years on probation and pay a substantial
Mike
fine.
Hubbard, who's been convicted of misappropriating public funds, retains the right to vote. But somebody else who steals a TV will lose their right to vote permanently.
I was working at Cash Connection, a store where they do payday advances and sell money orders. I've never been in trouble with the police or anything until this incident occurred.
In 2005, she got in the only legal trouble she's ever been in her entire life. She had a single count of a theft crime that she was convicted of.
I called and confessed to a supervisor out of Birmingham because I confessed to what happened. I didn't go to jail.
The only reason that Treva Thompson, our named plaintiff, can't vote is because she doesn't have the money to buy her right to vote back.
I need to pay about $44,000. I'm going to pay back my restitution. I'm trying and willing. Now that I'm working and I'm making $10 an hour, if I was to pay $50 a month, it's going to take me 73 years to pay off my restitution and to get my voting rights. I will never be able to vote. Never. And I don't think that's right.
The rules that require individuals to pay back their fines and fees are nothing more than a modern day poll tax. Before her conviction, she voted regularly in Alabama. She considered that a really important part of her civic life and civic duties.
I have grandkids, I have nieces, I have nephews. I know my vote is not the only vote, but I should have the opportunity to voice my opinion and to speak out for them.
The work that was done in the 1950s and 60s was a huge step forward, but we didn't cross the finish line. There's still work that has to be done.
How you doing, my brother? You all right? No one ever registered you to vote?
No, sir.
Okay, let's get your rights back right here. So in this neighborhood, it's poor and poverty-stricken, and these are the people that are mostly looked over. 14 days and 2 weeks, you don't get nothing from them? You come around there to that plaza, you know where my plaza at, and you come in Glasgow, I ain't heard nothing, because I'm dating it for the day. You got me?
Thank you.
All right, then.
Thank y'all. Hey, I'm glad I came outside. Thank y'all, too.
All right, man, we get your rights back. It's time for it to end. And we shall not stop fighting till we win.
Okay. First, does anyone have any reactions that they want to share from watching that video? It's okay if not.
Well, I'll just say that I was aware it was a problem, but when you put the faces on the individuals, you know, it makes it really sad. And I hope that we can do all we can. I mean, obviously it's unfair. I'm mad, but I'm almost more sad than I'm mad, especially when it talks about a modern day poll tax. You know, that is just, are we really that far behind? And the answer is yes. So I hope that we can understand the strategies and be of assistance.
I just want to say from past experience the last few years with this, we've experienced some people who maybe come across a windfall or inheritance, and they want to pay their fees on their convictions. They may have served the time, and now they want to pay the fees. But the problem with that, when you pay that fee, a big portion of that's going to interest. This isn't going directly to the fee, when this one individual, he had $19,000, he paid his fee, but he missed the one that took his voting rights away. Paid them all except the one, and nobody told him. That's what, I ran into a lady like that, and she said she did her time, but her fees were $90,000. So it's sad.
I was going to say, we had if you look on our YouTube channel, we've got a presentation from the Legal Services of Alabama, and they talked about all the fines and fees, and that is an eye-opener. I think that would be a good thing for folks after tonight to go back and watch, because you're going to find that the state of Alabama is paying for a lot of its operations off of the back of the poor. And so the people who are caught up in this system paying fines and fees and restitution are actually also paying for the operation of a lot of municipalities and counties who are not being adequately funded. And so there's injustice on top of injustices. So that's why this is such an important topic, because voting rights is the beginning of the solution. But if you can't get there, then you're stopped before you even start. So I guess back to you, Ellen. Say that again.
Is interest being charged on these fees? Is interest being charged on the fees that people are trying to pay off?
There is a 30% late fee on a lot of people just automatically are getting. I'll drop a link to that later on in this discussion, to the YouTube presentation that folks can look at after we're done here, because I think it's just so good to understand the fact that this is just absolutely unfair. All right. I'm going to bring the charts back up, Ellen. You ready?
Sure,
For that?
sure. That sounds good. And thanks for sharing, everyone. Yeah, the 30% late fee itself doesn't impact your right to vote, but like Roger was saying, the clerk of court will often apply any money you pay to the late fee first. So it's not actually going to the restitution itself. And how would somebody know to say, can you please apply my money first to the thing that's actually impacting my right to vote? So let's see, but yeah, so I'll kind of talk people through the voting rights restoration process now. And yes, we will be sharing the slides, I think. Correct me if that's wrong, Brian, but we are.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we'll drop those into everybody with everybody that was registered for the Zoom will get a copy of the slides as well as the recording of tonight's meeting.
Great. Okay, so first, some of those numbers in the video were older. I think they were probably from about 2017, 2018. So as of 2020, this is still old numbers, sorry. About 330,000 Alabamians have felonies, which is around 9% of the state population. About 150,000 African Americans in Alabama have felonies, which is about 15% of the total state African American population. So you can see that this is already racially disproportionate. And Black people account for more than half of sorry, I'm missing some of the slides. More than half of all Alabamians with felonies. Thank you, Kathy. So Alabama's felony disenfranchisement scheme is racially discriminatory and disproportionately impacts people of color. And if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And that's rooted in Alabama's history. So in 1901, there was a constitutional convention, and the president of the Constitutional Convention, John B. Knox, said, and what is it we want to do? Why it is within the limits imposed by the federal constitution to establish white supremacy in this state. So in that constitutional convention, they decided to disenfranchise citizens convicted of crimes of moral turpitude. And basically that language was never defined until 2017. So it allowed county registrars, county by county and person by person, to decide what was a crime of moral turpitude and who had committed such a crime. So obviously that's how it led to such racially discriminatory impact on Alabamians. There's a 1985 case called Hunter v. Underwood, which said that there was a discriminatory intent motivating that adoption of that language, crimes of moral turpitude. And then yet in 1996, a constitutional amendment continued using that language, felony involving moral turpitude. In 2003, just so you get a timeline, since the SERV process was created, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that's basically a certificate you have to get from the state in order to get your voting rights back, depending on your conviction now. But in 2003, that process was created. And then in 2016, Thompson versus Alabama kind of pushed Alabama to change its law. And that's Treva Thompson, who was one of the women in the video you just watched. And so Campaign Legal Center, which is where I work, represented those plaintiffs in that case, suing Alabama over its felony disenfranchisement scheme, saying, among other things, that this is a modern day poll tax, that Alabama's felony disenfranchisement law is racially discriminatory, it's arbitrary, and should be overturned as unconstitutional. And that litigation is still ongoing. So it's been years of Alabama refusing to let people vote who should be able to vote. But the one good thing from that was that in 2017, it pushed the state to define crimes of moral turpitude finally. So it gave a lot of people the right to vote back who it never should have been taken away from in the first place. So that law defined those crimes, and so it limits the convictions that can disqualify somebody's voting rights to about 40 crimes. And notably, it does not include any drug-related convictions except for trafficking. So a lot of people who were told prior to 2017 that they couldn't vote due to a drug possession conviction can now vote. And so you'll see a lot of people who heard they couldn't vote even in 2016 and aren't going to try to register to vote again, but can. Also, the list does not include third-degree convictions for the most part, I think, except for robbery third. So like burglary in the third degree does not impact somebody's right to vote. And like they talked about in the video, a lot of white-collar crimes like fraud and embezzlement are not on that list. So Alabama does not think that these white-collar crimes are crimes of moral turpitude, but it does think that something like theft is a crime of moral turpitude. And you can also probably think of reasons for that. But this law could reenfranchise about 139,000 Alabamians, which is really exciting, but most of those Alabamians don't know that they can now vote. So the real goal of the work that we do at Campaign Legal Center and the Restore Your Vote, and the Restore Your Vote program, and the League of Women Voters Voting Rights Restoration team is that we want people to know about their right to vote and the process that they can go through to get that right to vote back. And so if you go to the next slide. So there's something called a Certificate of Eligibility to Register to Vote, which we call CERVs. And that is for people who have a conviction on that list of about 40 disqualifying crimes. So it's basically just a barrier to somebody being able to get their right to vote back, because if they're eligible for it, the state has to give them this document within 44 days. So we think that about 109 Alabamians might be eligible for CERVs. And we'll talk about the criteria in a little bit, but only around 30,000 of those people don't owe fines, fees, or restitution, meaning that one of the biggest barriers to people getting the right to vote back is those outstanding financial obligations, which, as we've talked about, are a modern day poll tax. And so that's one of the biggest barriers to people getting the right to vote back. These CERVs are not discretionary, so you have to apply for them, which is pretty frustrating when somebody is eligible, but just how would they know that they have to get this document in order to register to vote? And you must meet a few criteria. So basically, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but you can't have the small subsection of convictions. You can't have felony charges currently pending, and you can't owe any fines, fees, or restitution on that disqualifying conviction. And you have to have completed the whole sentence, including probation and parole, if it's on that list of about 40 convictions. And you can go to the next slide. I'll send you, sorry, 1 second. I'm going to send everyone a link. So this is the activist manual, if you want to follow along in a little bit. The list of disqualifying convictions is on page 26 of that. And it's a really in-depth document, so you can look at it later too. So when you're going through the process of helping somebody figure out if they can vote or not in Alabama, you first want to see if that conviction's on the list, which is on page 26. And if their conviction's not on that list, they can just register to vote right away. There's no documents they need or anything. So often somebody, for example, with a drug possession conviction has maybe been told that they can't vote, but that conviction's not on the list, so they can just get registered. Or burglary in the third degree, or some of those things that we've talked about. They can just get registered. And so some people were wrongly told that they can't vote, like we talked about, but that list is definitive and it was made in 2017. So if you meet somebody who's saying, I was definitely told I can't vote, you might want to ask when they were told that, because if it was prior to 2017, the law has changed and you can let them know. And a lot of people can't remember their exact convictions. So Bryan mentioned Alacourt earlier, which is Alabama's court record database that you can look up somebody online and see what state convictions they have if that person can't remember. So the league has people who are experts in Alacourt and can look that up. I can also help look up somebody's convictions. But if you're interested in getting more involved with the league, let Bryan know after this meeting, and there will be a Alacourt training that's coming up to help get people familiar with how to use Alacourt to look up somebody's convictions, because it's really helpful when you meet somebody maybe who says that they might have burglary second or burglary third, but they can't remember, and that distinction is pretty important. Or if you meet somebody who doesn't know if they still owe fines or fees on a convict or restitution on a conviction. So Alacourt's super helpful. Despite Alabama being really bad in a lot of ways in terms of felony disenfranchisement, this court database is really good compared to a lot of states. So it makes it really easy to look up somebody's convictions statewide, as opposed to a lot of states which make you do it county by county or don't have online records available to the public at all. So Alacourt's great, and I encourage anyone interested to go to a forthcoming training with the league on Alacourt. And if you see somebody who has a federal or out-of-state conviction, those are confusing. There is a fee to use Alacourt, and so the league has, well, you guys can talk about that too, but there is a fee to use it. We have a login, so I can look up anything for you. So if you're working with somebody and you want to just email me like a name and a date of birth, I can look it up for you. And then I think you're able to use Alacourt in like the court location, like on a kiosk if you go to that, but that's pretty frustrating too. So if you want to talk to the league about how you can maybe get trained and start using it, that is possible. And then if you truly want to email or text me anytime, I can look it up for you. Yeah, and so if you meet somebody with a federal or out-of-state conviction, you can also email me because that requires some more research to compare the elements of the statute of the federal or out-of-state conviction with Alabama's language to see if we think it's disqualifying or not. And that is something that like CLC is trying to figure out with the state and suing over, because we think that if the elements match, it should be a similar statute. If the elements of the statute don't match, it's not disqualifying. So I think we have some ongoing litigation about that. But yeah, you can email me if you meet anybody like that. And I can do that research for you. And if we go to the next slide. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, this is just voter registration. We have a lot of forms in there, but most of you know that you can, if you have an Alabama ID, you can just register to vote online. And you wouldn't need that to print out the form. So yeah, if somebody's conviction is not on that disqualifying list, they can just register to vote right away. Alabama requires voter ID, and the rules are in that activist manual. And yeah, and then if they need to request an absentee ballot, you can help them with that as well. Maybe the next slide. So if you're looking at that list and somebody's conviction is on it, you could fill out a serve if this person meets a couple of criteria. So first, they can't be convicted of a subset of crimes, which are impeachment, murder, rape, sodomy, sexual abuse, sexual crimes against children, or treason. And those crimes are permanently disqualifying, but you can help somebody convicted of any of those try to request a pardon, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So there's a path for everybody, and if you do meet somebody who's been convicted of one of those, you can suggest that they fill out a pardon request, which is obviously not guaranteed, but it's still something that is proactive and that person can do to try to restore their voting rights. So for the serve form, which is required if the person meets all these criteria, they can't be convicted of one of those few crimes. And they can't have a felony charge currently pending, and they can't owe legal financial obligations from that disqualifying conviction. And that sentence must be entirely complete, including probation and parole. So if they meet all those criteria, that it's one of the disqualifying convictions, no felony charges pending, they don't owe any money on it, and they've completed the full sentence, they can fill out this SERV form, and the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles has to give them that certificate within 44 days. So you're going to want to follow up with that person to make sure they got it. And the next form. If somebody does owe legal financial, yes, no pending felony charges of any kind if they're trying to request a SERV. So if they don't have a disqualifying conviction, like a drug possession conviction, they can have a pending felony charge. But if they're trying to request a SERV on a disqualifying conviction, they can't have any pending felony charges. But you could have a pending misdemeanor charge. So if you meet somebody who has a disqualifying conviction and it's on that list, but they owe legal financial obligations on it, they can request this remission of fines, which is a form that we can help people fill out. And it's totally discretionary. We don't really know if the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles will grant it or not, but it's something that this person can do to try to get their voting rights back if they have a lot of legal debt that they're not able to pay off, which like Roger talked about, you'll meet a lot of people who have, and the video talked about this overwhelming amount of fines and fees on a disqualifying conviction, which we think is wrong and should not be the case. It should not be your wealth that impacts your right to vote. Maybe the next slide. Thank you. You can do a pardon request for people as well. This is for those people with the permanently disqualifying convictions, but you can also help anybody fill this out if somebody is saying that they want a pardon on any of their convictions. It's totally discretionary. There will be an investigation and a hearing, so that's something you'd want to let somebody know before they request a pardon, that it's somewhat invasive, and if that's not something they're ready for, then they shouldn't apply for it. Actually, and you're not eligible for a pardon if you're convicted of treason, impeachment, or if you've had a death sentence imposed but not commuted. So those would come up more rarely, but that's just a note. So yeah, you can help a lot of people apply for pardons. I know really anecdotally, because they are quite rare, but someone I know when I was living in Alabama in 2017 filled out a pardon request form, and she had her hearing and received her pardon, which was really exciting. But it did take years. So that's something you also want to let people know, is that process takes a long time. Yeah, and then if you go to the next slide, there's 2 practice scenarios. So just if you all want to practice with this a little bit, I'll read out one scenario and you can kind of jump in if you know the answer. So I'll read it off. So Larry was convicted of possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance in 1995. He's had no charges since. He served 5 years in prison and 3 on probation. He received a note from the Dallas County Registrar in 2007 saying that he was ineligible to vote and had been removed from the voter rolls. He owes $35,000 in fines and fees to the state and has been paying $75 a month since his release from prison in 2001. Is Larry eligible to vote, and what kind of paperwork should he fill out? So, and if anyone has an idea if Larry can register to vote, you can jump in or raise your hand or.
Larry has to pay off that fine first, the 35,000.
So,
I thought distribution of a drug was a disqualifying event.
so it's not disqualifying, is that what you said?
I thought
I'm saying he has to pay off his fine first.
Okay, maybe Kathy, if you go back to the slides so people can read it. Sorry. Yeah, so let's see, Jessica said that, and I think Laura did, but I lost her. That this conviction is possession with intent to distribute a controlled substance. So it's a drug possession conviction, which is not disqualifying. So Betty, you're onto something. If this was like a trafficking conviction, which might make more sense with that amount of fines and fees, that it sounds like it could be trafficking. But for a possession of drugs conviction, any of them, doesn't matter how much fines or fees you owe. So a lot of the stuff is in there to complicate matters, but really, if you look at the conviction, yeah, of course. If you look at the conviction, it's not disqualifying. It doesn't matter if that person's even still incarcerated. So a lot of people in Alabama can vote from jail or prison if their conviction's not on that list. And even though Larry owes $35,000 on that conviction, it doesn't matter because it's not disqualifying. So Larry could vote while incarcerated. Larry could vote when he owes money. Larry never lost his right to vote. And so the next scenario is actually a little more complicated. So I can talk you through it too, but I think it's helpful to think through. So Jonathan has two convictions. One is for theft of property 1 and burglary 3. And they're both from 2006. He served 3 years in prison, 2 on parole, and 2 on probation. In 2006, he received a notice that the Dallas County registrars had removed him from the voter rolls. He owes $4,000 in restitution and $10,000 in fines and fees from this burglary 3 conviction. He also assessed $3,000 for the theft of property conviction, but has paid that one in full. He has a charge pending for driving without a seatbelt, which is a misdemeanor in Alabama. Is he eligible to vote, and what paperwork should he fill out? So again, let me know if you have any thoughts. And you can kind of do, if you don't have like a full answer, but you just want to say something that you know that's disqualifying or not, let me know.
What's the difference between theft and burglary? I would think that's the same thing.
Yeah, you know, and I'm not an expert on Alabama's law, but I'm assuming it's partially with like the monetary amount and like what kind of building it was, etc. But if you go to page 26, I think, of the activist manual, and you look on the list, one of those might be on the list and one might not be, as a hint.
Thanks.
He should be eligible to vote if he files a cert.
That is right. I think Amy said that. So, yes, that is correct also.
So Ellen, has things changed? I saw it before, and this was 2018 or whatever, that if they owed fees or hadn't finished probation or parole, that they still weren't able to vote. Has that changed?
So it just depends on the conviction. So that hasn't changed, but if I feel like you're talking about a lot of people who have one of those disqualifying convictions, because it is a lot of people. It's about 40 different convictions. But if it's like a drug possession conviction, for example, it doesn't impact your right to vote to owe fines or fees. But those ones, in this second example, what Amy said, I'll explain a little bit. So the $3,000 that he owed on the theft of property conviction would have impacted his right to vote. So if you look on the list, theft of property 1 is on it, but burglary 3 is not. So theft of property 1 is the disqualifying conviction and burglary 3 is not. So this is all kind of a confusing example, but the money, the $14,000 total that Jonathan owes is on that burglary 3 conviction, which is not disqualifying. So that doesn't impact his right to vote at all. The $3,000 has been paid off in full, and that was the money that Jonathan owed on the theft of property conviction. So that would have impacted his right to vote, but he's paid that off in full. That's correct about the pending misdemeanor charge does not impact his right to vote, and Jonathan needs to fill out a serve to get his voting rights back. And he would list on it the theft of property conviction. He's eligible for the serve because it's been paid off. He doesn't have a felony charge currently pending, and he's served his whole sentence because that conviction was in 2006, and he's served the prison, parole, and probation term. So he's eligible for the serve, but I think that was Betty, sorry. It was hard to see. I think you were talking, but it's hard to see. It looks like he owes a bunch of money because of the burglary 3 conviction, and he still owes the $14,000, but that's not a disqualifying conviction, so it doesn't impact his right to vote at all. So I think maybe we go to the next slide, but it's basically the slide is saying that I have time for some questions if people have questions. So the main takeaways that I want to leave you with are that this is impacting many, many Alabamians. There's almost 140,000 Alabamians who have a felony conviction, but not a disqualifying one. So one that's not on that list. So those people can just register to vote. As of 2018, 72% of Alabamians with criminal convictions don't know about that 2017 law change. So a lot of people don't know that they can maybe register to vote now. And about 109 Alabamians might be serve eligible or need that remission of fines and fees form filled out. So a lot of Alabamians need this information, can possibly get their right to vote back, or at least should know the process for it. And the state is not telling people the process. The state is not making it transparent for people to know how to get your voting rights back. So I can drop my information in the chat, and you are welcome to email me, text me, call me if you have any questions. So I'll drop that in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. And I also saw that Janine Norman hopped on, and it's nice to see you, Dr. Jazz. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Ellen, I have a question. This is Betty Shin. What would it take for Walmart to allow the league to register, to set up a table in front of their stores to vote?
That's an interesting question.
Because that is the biggest pocket of people, the largest retail entity that I'm aware of, where people most likely needed a VRR or just to register to vote. And I think when you was here, I posed that to you. It's like, go see, you know, most grocery stores in Mobile will not allow that. But I remember one girl had a store closed down because they were it was a white owners in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and in Chomaville, and she had that store closed down because the church, one of the churches, bought a lot of stuff from them, and no, I don't want that in front of my store. And it's like, well, you won't get the customers either.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And
I'm not sure, but Ellen, you could, I mean, that's something that's, I mean, Betty, I think that's something that needs to be worked. You know, I know in our end of the state, Walmart won't even let us do a voter drive. So, you know, we're up in Huntsville. So Ellen, I'm not sure if you've got a solution that's, I guess, Betty, were you looking for a legal solution or?
I'm just looking for, I just want to know what would it take?
Yeah.
Because
But I don't think
the people that we're looking for to register, they go to places where, I mean, if you're going to somebody's campaign, see, those people are usually civically engaged and they're already voters. And I'm thinking of I think of Walmart in particular, because people with lower income and economic resources and stuff, they love Walmart, and it's always crowded. And I know you can't, they're traded on the stock exchange and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I guess it would be a legal solution to it, but I don't know how you can make people do something.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. And I can maybe touch base with you offline. I know we had tried to do that when I was in Mobile, and I'm trying to think of somebody that I talked to when I was down there who maybe had connections at Walmart. So, and I think it really was hard, but we can maybe talk about that after, Betty, if you drop your email in the chat.
Yeah,
I do think it's a good place.
I think it is kind of a store by store issue. And one of the things I wanted to switch gears, if we could, to let Bryan talk about, Ellen's coming in from Campaign Legal Center. But Bryan Lorge is our voter services state VRR lead. And so he is there to work with Betty. I know you've got people at the Mobile League who are experts on VRR. At least you got a few, and I'm hoping we'll get some more in the Mobile League and every other league. And so he's going to talk about that. And then at the end, we can talk more about the league as far as how we can all work together with trying to, basically expand our reach. And then there's also organizations on here, and I'm seeing several of them that we've been talking to different groups that are not league about how we can help work together as in collaboration to help reach people where they're at. So I'm going to pass it back. If I can figure out how to get back to the screen. And for some reason, I'm not able to see people when I share, so I don't know why. So anyway, I guess that'll, maybe now I fixed it. So Bryan, hand it back to you.
All right. And then let me,
can you see the screen?
I can see the screen. I just had forgotten something before and I didn't know. I'm going to stick it in now so it's not on that slide. But when I was talking about our VR network before, I left out an important part. And part of it is we support different kinds of events. We do voter services event, but CLC has a thing called Through Text that is reaching out to people. They run ads at various places and people contact us through a text tool and we provide them services with there. We talked about Alacourt and Alacourt research, which is real important because one of the things I hate about this whole process is I'm an engineer by trade and I like definite answers. And sometimes when you're talking to the folks, they know, oh, I had this kind of conviction 20 years ago, and they know it's not disqualifying. We just tell them to go register a vote. But sometimes it's like, well, I can't remember what it was and exactly, and so we need the research. So what I want to tell everyone is that there's different roles and we need help everywhere across the board. And we have some people that do everything. They do in-service events, they do through text, they do Alacourt. We have some people that don't like the through text, so they just do in-person events. During COVID, we had a couple of people that just did the through text because you could do that from sitting at home. They didn't have to be out exposed. So I left that out on the network. There's a lot of different roles we need. And if you're interested, we'll find something for you to do. Having said that, back to this slide, again, the big effort for us is to get out and try to meet the people that need our support and provide them information and assistance. And I know Ellen mentioned this several times, but I'm amazed by the number of times when I'm out doing an in-service event, especially, that someone will come up and you'll ask them to register to vote, and you can kind of just tell by their reaction, something's not quite, they're not registered. And I'll generally try to pull them aside and ask them if they have, if they're not registered, if it's because of felony. And even though, again, it's been, 5 years now since the law changed, there are many, many people that are not aware of that. So it's kind of important, like I say, I get out there and try to get them aside. Some people are embarrassed about talking about it. They don't want to say they're registered when they're not, but they don't want to tell you why. So I think it's important to kind of, privacy is kind of important, pull them off to the side on that. And again, our services are free. And I think it's important that we are trained volunteers. We're not legal representatives, but we're trained volunteers, and make sure we let them know. And again, the best case is hopefully they don't have a disqualifying felony. We just tell them to register. But if not, the whole serve and process is kind of complicated, and just trying to help them navigate it through is important. Next slide, please. And again, this slide just kind of reemphasized that I'm still amazed in 2022 how many people are not aware of the law changes. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to blame anyone, but that includes registrars. There are a lot of registrars that do not know the rules, and we'll have people that will go to register legal and will get rejected. And that's the kind of help we sometimes provide, is trying to communicate with registrars to make sure they understand the rules and clarify that someone they may think is not eligible to register can register. And again, getting the word out, I'm going to go back to the partnerships. So hopefully we can establish some partnerships to get us in contact with the people that need our help so we can help them. Next slide. Okay, I think this is the slide I covered earlier, but again, the key part, I'm looking, and I can't read the entire chat thing, but there was a comment about not asking them, you need to update your voter registration information. Yeah, that's probably a good point. I like that suggestion. Thank you. This slide, again, I had my slides out of order, but this is the one, a big thing, not only the different roles. On the intake process, and we'll show you the form in just a minute. I didn't know which order to put in, it's up at the form late, but it's a good way to get information we need if we need to do further research. Go back one, Kathy. I was just kind of making a comment there. But the top part of the form, we ask the citizen to fill that out with information they need. Again, it's kind of important. Make sure we get their legal name, because the information in Alacourt is by their legal name, not by, like, if they have a nickname or something. And also the date of birth is real important, because some names are very common names, and there are many, many records. So it helps us make sure we have the right person. Again, if the people are confident they don't have a disqualifying felony, we just go ahead and tell them to go ahead and register to vote. But if in doubt, we tell them to check it out. And then that gets into the Alacourt. And I think Ellen gave us a pretty good idea of how complicated that process is, but it's even a little bit worse. I mean, things like, the important thing is it's someone may be charged with a disqualifying felony, but either convicted of a lesser felony or plead to a lesser felony, which is not disqualifying. And it's what they were either convicted of or pled to is the determining factor, not what they were charged with. So that's the kind of information you can get out of Alacourt when we do the research. And again, I'm just going one more time, the process, and it's not by accident, the process is very confusing and convoluted. And so people need help. Okay, next slide. I think should be the form, Kathy. Yeah, this is the form. And we tried to make it, when we developed the form, make it as flexible as possible. Again, up front, the top part will have the person needing the assistance fill that out, go through and answer the questions as best you can, but we can do research. And we set up this form. Some people, if you're at an in-person event, and some of our volunteers are very good, they establish a personal relationship with the person. And so we try to set this form up so it can be done either way. Either if you are doing the work with a person and want to go back in contact, and we'll give you the research. If you want us to go back in contact, we can do it. So getting all the information on the form is important. Next slide. All right, next steps, where are we going from here? Again, and either if you email, and I'll talk about emails here in a minute, if you want copies of the access manuals or these slides, Kathy, I'm going to ask you real quick, do they need to request them, or do you have a list of people that we can send them to?
I've got, let me come off share because I'm having trouble seeing everybody.
Okay.
So with everybody that registered for this, what I was planning to do was to follow up with a copy of these slides as well as a link to the recording that's on YouTube. And so everybody will get it, even if they didn't show up, because that's just easier. So, and I think that'll be, I think, and then when if people have questions, you can also reply back, and we'll make sure that we get it to the right people. And I'll CC you, Brian, when I send it, to make sure people know how to reach you.
Okay, and I think I registered, so I should get it. Okay, you want to go back to the slides? Thank you.
And I did want to mention, Brian, one thing I noticed, I think there's a later version of that intake form. Becky, I was thinking we had one with the actual phone number and email on the form itself. And I was just going to mention, I used it at an event we did back in the fall, and it was really handy because, you know, by going through that process and stepping through it, then it gives us a record. So if somebody got turned down, then we can go back and look at it, and it gives us a way to kind of have a phone number for example, to be able to find people. Because if you don't do that, then you kind of lose it. You can't find out how to find them again. Okay, go back to it.
Yeah, go back, and I think.
Okay.
So I'm going to modify this first slide a little bit. Hopefully you'll get those. If for some reason you don't get one or the slides or the manual, just email me and I'll make sure you get it. If you want to help with our VRR efforts, please let me know. And I say in what capacity. If you know you're interested in through text, or you're interested in in-person events, whatever, or Alacourt, please let me know. Alacourt training we will set up in a couple of weeks. Typically that lasts about 2 hours, I think an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on questions. And I hate to say, Ellen really kind of depressed me today when I heard Alacourt's one of the better systems. I hate to be in those other states. Because I find it somewhat tedious sometimes to get through that. Or if you have any questions, again, feel free to let me know. And Kathy, I think there's one more slide, and I'll talk on that last slide about the email address and the phone number. Okay, I originally had my personal phone cell and email address on this. Kathy, this is better. These numbers are a League of Women Voters phone and a League of Women Voters email, but it's set up where if it's the VRR, it will come to me. So I will get it through this way. And that phone number, it translates it into a voice. You'll get an answering machine, but it'll send me an email. The reason that's important is not necessarily get a hold of me, but this can be used by anybody that needs our services. If someone either emails that email address or calls that number and leaves a message, it will come to me and I will get someone, either myself or more likely try to get someone else to get back in touch with them and see if they need support. So I think it's better we use these email addresses. And I meant to add it, Kathy, and I have it on my computer. We do have like a 5x7 postcard, which talks about this, has these numbers on it. And that's a good tool to take to events. So even if there's someone just wants, so, hey, if you need information, then we can hand those out. I should have put that in the presentation, but I forgot to. Having said that, I'll be glad to answer any questions, or the real experts are also on the call, so they can answer too, Kathy and Ellen. And we have some of our real good Ninja Warrior supporters are on. I now see have joined the call too, so we have help if there's any questions.
I was going to say, I think it'd be interesting if some of the folks who've done this, who've been doing this for a while, I've heard so many people that tell me this is one of the most rewarding things they've ever done, which I can attest to that, because it really feels like you're doing, you're in the right place. And this is such important work.
I want to ask Ellen something. Is that your ad that appears on Facebook? Because I see it every day. Is that you?
It might be. We are. Restore
Well, I
Your
see-
Vote does push ads in target states, and I think Alabama is probably one of them, for trying to help people get registered to vote and restore their rights.
Does that go directly to you, or do you?
I don't do it as much, but Blair, Bowie.
I think I can't talk about the actual mechanics, Roger, but the, right when COVID was starting, I guess it was in January, everything seems to have happened right when things started shutting down. In January, we started a text campaign working with Blair, and it was a Facebook campaign. And so that was 2020, big election year. And we were trying to find a way and that's what Betty was getting at. It's really hard to find people when you go out to these events and you're trying to find people who need to get their rights restored. You know, they're out there working, they're out there trying to live and keep things going. They're not showing up at these events that we have at the same time they're at work. So this Facebook social media campaign was really kind of an amazing opportunity because it reached people on social media. They clicked a button and gave their last name and then we basically, and a phone number, and then Blair queued it up so that we could actually do it by text, which was kind of a really neat way to do it, because by reaching people via text, we could go back and forth using the same tool. If you ever done a campaign, like when you're out there trying to reach people to get them to go vote, it's the same kind of tool. You talk to them via text until you go through the evaluation process on Alacourt, figure out their situation. You can always pick up the phone and call them through the computer. So it was a great way for people who were isolated due to COVID to get their rights restored. And it gave the members, the League of Women Voters who were doing this, a way for us to get people trained on how to use Alacourt. And so it was a great way to operate. Now that everything's starting to get a little bit back to normal, then we've got a lot more face-to-face events going on. And then we're also trying to expand partnerships with other organizations so that, we're getting back into more of the face-to-face type stuff, which is a whole lot more fun too, because who doesn't want to talk to someone face-to-face? And we also have some folks in Birmingham who are really active. I see Becky and I saw Dana earlier, that they're working with other groups sitting outside the day reporting center. We've done that a couple of times here in Huntsville, but that's, there's all kinds of ideas on how you can reach people. And Bryan is our coordinator across the, trying to pull together all these different groups to keep all these different ideas, because there's got to be, it's a multiple ideas. We're working with Faith in Action right now to try to find a way that we can help people, maybe through some of the connections that the pastors have with their churches. And then we're talking to Jessica about some things she's got going. So we're trying to figure out how can we help people, maybe be a back room, where we're helping do the analysis and then help, basically reach people however we can do it.
Well, I was thinking about, the reason I was asking, I didn't want to steal Campaign Legal Center thunder here, but since we have a local lead here and we have a really good media team, I was thinking about doing an ad similar to the Campaign Legal Service for the League of Women Voters Tennessee Valley. Because when I read Campaign Legal Service, I think the government. That's what pops in my mind. And it's like, I don't know if I want to deal with that or not. But League of Women Voters Tennessee Valley, that kind of changes your mindset a little bit. And I was thinking about asking if we could put an ad out there so we would get the people clicking on our ad and get their numbers and all.
Ellen, I don't know why that would be a problem, do you? We're
Yeah.
really just trying to figure out, there's got to be a magic combination that, you've got to have people talking about this topic, because if you don't, then nothing's going to change. It's the same way. Yeah. It's like
the goal is just to reach people. So.
Yeah. We've got to, it's just like prostate cancer, breast cancer. If people started talking about it, then you started to actually making a difference in getting early detection. And if we don't all start getting out there talking about this topic and reaching people where they're at and making them understand that it's not, even though there is some stigma, they really need to get over it as best as they can. And because we're not going to ever overcome this until we can figure out how to help reach people. And that's a hard problem. I just don't know the answer. Anyway, I get off my soapbox. That's it. I am so happy that we're working with all of you. So that's and Bryan, you've got his email and his phone number, and you can feel that phone number will reach him.
I just looked under the chat box and someone said, never ask people, are they registered to vote? And it's like, good, I'm glad somebody else recognized that, because I've always found that very intimidating to people. It's like, what, whether they are or they aren't. It's like anything else, you have to earn the right to talk to people, you know, and try to make it as conversational as possible. It's like, I'm a registered voter, but you aren't. I mean, you never want to give off that kind of attitude and stuff. And I think I heard one of the guys say something about pulling them over to the side and just making it as personal as you can, just conversational. But for me, and I've been doing voter registration, I think probably about since 2012 or something. Location, location, location. It's finding the places where the greatest amount of people are who you believe are not registered to vote, and be in a location where they aren't intimidated by the people around them and stuff. It's like the perfect combination of location, the weather, you know, what it is they're doing at the time. And that's why the Walmart thing keeps coming up, because I just can't think of a better place than Walmart or supermarkets. I mean, usually if I'm going to the supermarket, I'm going to pick something up, I don't want to stop. But I think I probably got it. I lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and it's a very transient kind of environment. You know, if I didn't like an apartment or I moved my job, I moved my apartment, I never had to worry about updating my voter registration, because when I went to the supermarket, there were always people outside sitting at tables asking if I needed my information updated. So they did it for me, and I don't know why we can't bring that here to Alabama. Well, I do know why, but we just can't get the retailers and the stores and stuff to allow a nonpartisan group like the League of Women Voters. And just watching the news for the last few days, if we don't get busy, it's like, oh my God, it's this reconstruction all over again, because just the atmosphere and the environment, and for a lot of people, it's like they want to blame everything on Donald Trump or whatever. I really blame it on Barack Obama. You know, here comes this black guy, and there's no anything about him. It's like, we got to stop this. And if today and yesterday don't prove that Americans are scared of the progress that's already been made, the acceptance of LGBTQI, and just diversity in and of itself. You know, all of us harbor different prejudices and stuff. But the more that we're together and the more that we interact, we learn to appreciate those kinds of differences and that kind of diversity. And just to see what's going on nationally now, it's not funny, it is actually scary to me. And I'm talking about them trying to find voting like for 9 times, 8 or 9 times the last time I looked, for the Speaker of the House. It's insane in the 21st century that this would be going on. That's it. I just had to make that comment.
Thank you, Betty. I see
Laura
Laura
has a question. Yeah.
Well, not so much a question, but a comment. I know what you're saying about trying to get out to Walmart and places where we could get in front of a, very large group of people. And if it's store by store, then we can work with that. But I think there's also something to be said about working with local retailers like the barbecue place in Decatur. I mean, that was a small place and we didn't have thousands of people, but we had pretty good traffic that day. And I know Robin did at least one surf, and another lady who just found out that she could register to vote. And we signed up a lot of people to register. Roger, you were there. I mean, do you remember it the same way, or am I just dreaming? Unmute yourself.
So
anyway, my
Laura,
point is that we shouldn't totally just forget about these smaller locations in the communities where people do traffic through there, whether it's to pick up their barbecue and go to the grocery or get their nails done, or go to the thrift store.
So Laura,
those areas get on traffic too.
Laura, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but I would invite everybody that's got ideas on VRR type events to email Bryan.
I can't hear anybody.
Okay. Well, I would suggest email Bryan with ideas on places that you can have events. He'll be calling together the VRR network to meet and strategize and also arrange training for anybody that wants to get down and dirty on the Alacourt type process. Before we end, which we're at 7:28 right now, I want to just step back and thank you for showing up, because that's so important, and I hope you are getting excited and ready to start talking to people about this topic, because it's so important to try to change Alabama. I did want to tell you that next week, give you a preview, next Monday night, we have another forum, an educational forum about civic engagement and advocacy. And what we're going to talk about there is we've got Patricia Todd that's going to talk about the legislative process in Montgomery. And then we've got Tara Bailey that's going to give us some information about how to use the new Alabama channel to basically watch what's happening in Montgomery on your schedule, because right now they're not recording these live streams, and Tara has got a project that the league is sponsored to record those. And then Robin Buckley, sorry, is going to talk about the advocacy effort that the league has been working to help bring together all the local leagues to help us do a legislative advocacy. And then also mark your calendar for February the 13th. We've got our very first, for the 2023 year, Voter Services Educational Forum. And I'm so excited. Bryan is going to be back with us on that as a panelist. He's a precinct captain in Limestone County, so he's got the information about the processes for elections. That'll be very vital. We're talking about voter suppression and things that are making it hard for people to vote in Alabama. And in addition to Bryan, we're having Dylan Nettles, who is the voting rights lead for the ACLU Alabama. And then we've got Duell Ross, who is with NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And if you were watching the testimony for the Milligan v. Merrill lawsuit that was presented to the Supreme Court, he was the lawyer that was presenting that case to, to the Supreme Court. So I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a powerful kickoff to our effort to try to educate the people of Alabama about the topic of voting rights and try to help push to make people understand that their vote really matters if they can, that we can make a difference if people would show up. So anyway, thank you and good night and have a great evening, and we'll see you on Monday. Thank you, Bryan, and thank you,